Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody. Today, on the scope of the course Islamic Civilization in World History, I'm going to present a very interesting topic for me, and I hope for everybody else, which is evolution of Islamic architecture and art. So without further ado, I'll start a little bit with an introduction. As we know, Islam is a way of life. So anything people make can be considered as Islamic architecture if they follow the principle of Islam. There's this question if there is an Islamic architecture going on or not. Well, since we all agree that Islam has covered all the fields of our life, from political, from social, from everyday life, from family, from jurisprudence, etc., definitely it has covered the built environment as well, because at the end of the day, it is there where we are living. And it's impossible for Islam to not be influencing this field of study, let's say. Islamic architecture is the entire range of architecture that has evolved within Muslim culture throughout the history of Islam. The term, therefore, includes religious as well as secular building, because sometimes there is this misunderstanding or misconception that Islamic architecture is just about mosque or tekkes or turba or tombs, right? These buildings which are directly linked with the Islamic religion. But in general, Islamic architecture is all kind of buildings, going from palaces, from fortress, from hammams, baths, for example, fountains, hospitals, which before was used Darushifa, etc., etc. All kind of buildings that the human being is using for their life, and they are not against the Islamic rules. Islamic architecture, since it has evolved in different regions, of course, it has a diversity of styles. But as we know, it originated in Arabian Peninsula with the coming of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the 7th century. And later on, with the spread of Islam in different regions, it was spread in terms of architecture as well. Was it just Islamic? I mean, was the style, the design elements, everything was influenced only from Islamic religions? Of course not. We should remember that Islam was spread in an area which was populated before. It had a civilization before. It had a built environment evolved and evolved before. Therefore, Islam did not destroy, did not expel, did not how say that did not refuse what it found, but actually enhance it. Therefore, if we're talking about some influences to Islamic architecture besides the religion itself, Islamic architecture had the influence from Greco-Roman traditions. For example, the region of Byzantine empires, southeastern Anatolia in Syria, in Egypt, or Maghreb. They were influenced from this style. Also, it had some Eastern tradition, for example, from Mesopotamia or from Persia. Therefore, they adopted some representative styles or elements from Hellenistic and Roman style, and they made it part of their architecture. Now, I'm trying to send you into a traveler, maybe into a traveling with some photos of Islamic development, either it be a building or either it be a city. You'll see later in the slides, just to understand and to feel a little bit this sensation of Islamic architecture. For example, this one is the Mosque Cathedral of Cordoba in Spain. The other one are some cities. The first one is in Istanbul city, Süleymaniye complex, or in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Maybe we should mention that Islamic architecture was expanded from Arabian Peninsula to North Africa up to Southeast Europe, such as the Balkans, in the Spain, but also it influenced the Indian part, it influenced Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., wherever the Islam took part as a religion. While looking to these photos of the city, I want to mention a little bit what were the design principles that shaped these cities, that formed the components. The design principles were divided into four. The first one is the natural law, where the development respected, right, and was adapted based on the built form of the city, of the earth, of the climate, of the topography of that region. The second one was the religious and cultural belief, which was one of the most important elements in forming the centers of cultural life, where they give the central role to the mosque. So if the neighborhood was a Muslim neighborhood, the main component of the city was the mosque. If the neighborhood was a Christian or a Jewish community, the main the main building was the religious buildings, such as a church, for example, or synagogue. This photo here, the illustration, is a very interesting photo because it's showing Athens, it's showing the Acropolis at the top, and you see the bazaar there going straight to the main mosque. Nowadays, actually, we don't see anymore this kind of perspective because this was during the Ottoman period. We're going to Sarajevo, for example. Another philosophy in terms of urban development was the Sharia law. So all these cities, somehow they reflected the physical and social relationship between public and private realms, between neighbors and social groups. And all of this was influenced or was guided, better to say, from the Sharia law. For example, what do you mean? What do we mean when we say this? The height of the wall above the height of the camel was a must. Why? Because of the privacy. The person who is not a family member or the person who is just passing the street, he couldn't see inside the private space of the house. And another element which influence the urban development in Islamic cities is a social principle. So they will be having this gathering maybe or this social organization based on the groups sharing the same blood or the same ethnic or the same cultural perspectives. So if we just want to find out what were the main elements of a city in Islamic civilization, we can divide those into seven buildings. The first one is a mosque, which was the core, as you see here in the diagram, is the core of the whole development, is in the center, is like the soul of the city. The second one is the souk, is the market, the bazaar. We can say that also. I mean, depends from the language we are using. The bazaar was around the mosque, so it's a kind of philosophy of life where the soul, the spiritual life, is connected with your worldly life as well. I mean, you can't be focused only into religious perspective, let's say, or on your spiritual development, but you need to work for this daily life to have a very good and a sustainable continuity for yourself and for your family. The third one is residential neighborhood or the houses where there is included a madrasa, is a bakery or other shops, for example. Let's say different facilities which will make the life of the citizenship easier and more sustainable. The fourth one is the Kasbah, is the government palace. Usually this one was put or was placed in the higher part of the city so they can control the whole development of the area. The fifth one is a road network. The infrastructure was very important. Even though at the beginning was very modest, but later with the strength of Islamic empires, let's say, they start working on the infrastructure as well. They start planning the roads, the width of the roads. In the small neighborhoods, they were narrow. In the main neighborhood, they were wider. So it was infrastructure played a very important role in planning the whole urban design of a city. The sixth one is wall. Wall means the covering wall. It's like the borders nowadays, right? Every country has its own borders. So during that time, they had these walls which protected the city inside. And the seventh one is the outer part. In the outer part, most of the time, they will be placing the graves. The graves, they were separated, or let's say they were splitted. Muslim graveyards were in a part of the city. The other religious graveyards were in the other part. of the city. So the diagram here somehow explained graphically what I just said. Here I put some photos of the old, or maybe let's say the most old cities of Islamic civilizations, such as Qasr city in Egypt, or Kufa, Anjar in Lebanon, Ramla. So we are talking about the year 700. I mean, after 700 plus, right? After the Prophet Muhammad was sent, the city of Baghdad is one of the oldest city and maybe one of the best cities during Islamic civilization. Here we see the Samarra, the capital of Abbasid Caliphate from 19th century, yes. So after this intro, let's go to separate styles that evolved in Islamic architecture. I put this photo as an illustration. It's a mosque somehow, but here is a combination of different styles, and I found it very interesting to understand a little bit the variety, right? The diversity of the styles, of colors, of design elements throughout the Muslim world. So the first period is the early Islamic architecture, we call it, from 600 to 622 to 661. This period begins with the proclamation of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. We can say that it is a modest architecture, mostly with one-story buildings and with local materials. We have small religious objects without minaret. And then later the mosque in Medina. As you can see here in the photo, it was very simple. It was without minarets during the time. It was a mosque and a home, because there were the rooms of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam with his wives. But also this kind of mosque was beyond that, because there we had different meetings. We had the starting expedition for wars, for example. They were handling their political meetings. So somehow we understand even the role, right? The role of the mosque, which is not limited only to the spiritual side. After that, the first improvement of Islamic architecture took place during the Rashid Caliphate, and after it was more developed during Umayyad Caliphate. So without further ado, we go to the second style, which is the Umayyad Caliphate. Umayyad architecture represents the birth of the Islamic architecture tradition, we can say. During the time, we have expansion, right? A territorial expansion. And here we have also some influences from the earlier styles, such as Sassanids and Byzantines. During this period, Islamic art developed rapidly, of course, because somehow we saw the growth of new architectural forms and buildings. So from that simple building, one story with mud, with bricks, we will see in the photo. Here, for example, we go to another type of building, right? Because Muslims now, the artists or the architects or the builders of that time, they were exposed with a new civilization for them. For example, the Byzantine civilization. So they saw what they have done, and they were influenced a little bit on the development. The development center during Umayyad period was Damascus. Mostly the religious plan, we can say it was like a transcept plan. The dome of rock building gained all the radiant power, and it is a characteristic of Islamic architecture, even though it has few. I put these two photos just to compare. It had influences actually from the Byzantine church of Vitalis in Raven, because this church was built in the century of 6, while Dome of Rock in the 7th century. After this, we have other type of buildings during that time, such as Aqsa Mosque, for example, or the Great Mosque of Damascus, which was constructed in the earliest of 8th century and is one of the oldest mosques during Umayyad period. This mosque, actually, if you compare the plan and analyze it, you can tell that it was earlier, maybe many time ago, it was a church before or a basilica, and then it was converted to a mosque. After this, with the takeover of Abbasid, the Umayyad developed their course by continuing from North Africa to Spain. Maybe here in the Spain, we can say that is a culmination of artistic and architectural values in terms of Umayyad style. And two most important development that they strike our eyes, and nowadays they are also visited from millions of tourists, is the Cordoba Mosque and the Alhambra Palace. From this photo also we can tell that they have very dramatic interiors, very elaborate. They have a different kind of arches used, horse heel, double arches, something like a very outstanding for the time when this was built. But the decoration also includes several types of marbles, glass mosaics, floral elements, geometric decoration, the usage of lighting, having of courtyards and the landscape, the water, etc. Another view for the Alhambra Palace with the interior courtyard with this heavenly garden, let's say. The third period is Abbasid period, because Umayyad period, I consider it one. It's just that from North Africa, they went to the Spain. The Abbasid period is where Islamic architecture spread eastward. Here we have regional and political change. And this one also, of course, resulted in the field of architecture. The most important centers of the Abbasid were the cities of Baghdad, Samarra, and Raqqa. And this period also marks one of the oldest urban planning of the Islamic city. For example, the Baghdad city is one of them. Baghdad city, it's called, or it is considered like an ideal city, because we have this round city with all the components inside this circle. Here is another illustration where the mosque is in the middle, is surrounded from the first protecting wall, and then we have residential, and then another protecting wall, residential gate, and again protection wall with 4 gates from the 4 sides. So it was a kind of military planning as well. In case if this city was invaded, they had this breaking up through defensive wall, not to let the enemy go in. The Samarra city, another one during Abbasid period. So in terms of objects, one of the most famous architectural marvels can be the Ibn Tulun Mosque, as we see, with the courtyard in the middle. Here we have the development of fountains as well, where they take wudu. We have another view of Mosque of Ibn Tulun. We have the palace. Here we have development of palace as well, the great palace of Samarra. Now these are just the ruins that are present, but again here we can see the type of arches, 3 types of arches applied in the facade. The Mosque of Samarra. The Mosque of Samarra, if you analyze the shape, it has also some influence from Mesopotamian architecture, actually. And very important is to mention that here we have also the first world university constructed, Al-Qarawiyyin University in Fez, in Morocco. It was built in 859, and it was founded by Fatima Al-Fihri in Fez. At the beginning, it was designed as a mosque, madrasa, and educational center for higher level. So if you analyze the plan here as well, we'll see the different components inside it. We have the schools, we have the library, we have the prayer hall, we have the courtyard, and everything what is needed to have a proper university. Going on to Fatimid period, which was developed from 909 to 1171. Well, from the name, we can understand that it was took from the daughter of Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salam. The Fatimid architecture combines elements from architecture of Syria, Iraq, Iran, and East Asia with elements of North Africa to the west. It is mainly made by stone and bricks. During this time, we have development of calligraphy, the style of Kufi as well, we can see. The range of construction varied from mosques, museums, tomb monuments, palaces, monumental gates, schools, etc. The central area of activity and architectural expression during the Fatimid rule was in Cairo. So in Cairo, we had the first congregational mosque, which was Al-Azhar, and the higher education built next to it, Al-Azhar University. So here in the plan also we see the mosque and the components of the madrasa. Some views from this building. The sixth one, or the fifth period is Ayyubid period. The Ayyubid dynasty came to power under the leadership of Salahuddin, anhu, as we all know. We can say that this kind of civilization displays two continuum between two traditions, the late Fatimids that we just left behind and the early Mamluks. The Ayyubid is important to say that they left impressive tradition of military architecture. Why? Because this was built due to a response to the Crusaders that was happening during that time. So a number of fortresses was built originally from Crusaders, but later were taken from Ayyubids and they were renovated and were expanded. Here we have also the establishment of madrasas, of higher institutions of religious learning. For example, here I just put a photo as an example or illustration, Madrasa al-Zahiriya in Aleppo. This another madrasa, for example, is Al-Sahiba Madrasa in Damascus, which was built by Rabia Khatun, and also the Masjidum of Sali Najm al-Din Ayyub was also sponsored from the wife of Shajar al-Dur. Why I'm saying this is to show that here actually the role of women was high. They played also a role in development of the city and in the building of different kind of buildings. Another interesting feature that happened during our Ayyubid period is also in terms of urban planning, because they took kind of rule, we can say, right? They say that all the streets, somehow, they will try to direct them, the streets and the buildings, in accordance with the Qibla. What I can say is that maybe this can happen because it seems like the Islam also should be shaping more in terms of the strength. The stronger Islam becomes as a civilization, the stronger urban principles you can put. The sixth period of architectural evolution is the Mamluk period, which starts from 1250 to 1517. This Mamluk history is divided into two periods based on different dynasties lines. The Bahri Mamluks from 1250 to 1382, and the Bahri, and also the second one, Burji Mamluk, from 1382 to 1517, of Caucasian, Circassian origin. The Mamluk architecture, we can say that it was very cosmopolitan in nature. Cairo was an important international political and trade center, which attracted artisans from different regions. In terms of style, Mamluk architecture incorporated influences from Andalusia, North Africa, Europe, Central Asia, and Persia. Mamluk buildings are generally not symmetrical. Rather, they tend to emphasize the use of balance over symmetry in their overall composition. The buildings are monumental in scale, as you can see here, for example, from this photo of Cairo that I have placed, especially those located there. In terms of material, they use mainly stone, but also wood. They use indoors mihrabs and also the usage of mashrabiyas. The minaret has different sections along its axis, resulting into three levels of minarets, like base, axis, etc. Balconies that rest on the arches of the muqarnas can separate these parts from each other. Mamluks generally use calligraphy widely. Here for this presentation, I put one example of Mamluk architecture, which is the complex of Sultan Al-Mansur Al-Qawin. This complex is very huge, and here we can see the incorporation of different typologies of architecture. For example, here we have mausoleum, we have madrasa, and we have hospitals, and we have also a prayer hall. So you see all these functions, several functions, they were combined into a very massive building, let's say. Some views from the internal of these spaces, the central courtyard, the Mamluk type of minarets we see here. We see this mihrab carving and styles with columns with marmer and different colors of those. So we see that elaboration or the decoration level was in a very high level, we can say. And also we see the mixing of decoration methods. You see calligraphy there, you see geography there, geometric pattern there, sorry, you see arabesque or floral design within one space. So moving on to the 7th period of Seljuks, the Great Seljuks. The Seljuk Empire was founded by all Turks in the second half of 11th century. During this period, Iran was under Seljuk realm, let's say. In 1063, Isfahan became the capital of Great Seljuk Empire under Al-Barslan. The Melik Shah Sultanate was the most brilliant period of the Seljuks in all aspects. The Seljuks brought many new elements, let's say, in architecture. They brought double domes, angular roofs, sharp arches, Turkish triangle in dome construction, cylindrical minarets, etc. The type of mosque was 4E1, as you can see here in this photo. It was a 4E1 mosque with a courtyard and domes in front of the altar. The most impressive example of architecture we can say is the Isfahan Mosque. It is an early Arabian Abbasid style mosque with brick pillars. Also, another important building is Sultan Sanjar Mausoleum, for example, built in the ancient Silk Road. Actually, during this period, we see the development of a lot of tombs. Compared to the previous periods. Also, we can mention another very important building, which is Sivajgok Madrasa. The development of madrasa and the education itself was also a primer or a concern during that time. The madrasa was developed within a central courtyard, as you can see from the plan. And also another important building is the Mosque of Diyarbakir. This one is considered one of the oldest mosques in Anatolia, actually, and possibly in all Turkey. It was built in 11th century by the Seljuk Sultan Malik Shah I, over an older mosque. Me, myself, when I see to this central part of the mosque, I see also the style of a basilica. So most probably here we had the old basilica during the Byzantine period, and after the Muslim took over, they built and they expanded this basilica into a mosque. And besides that, the mosque, we have also the courtyard in the middle with the fountains, 2 fountains. We have a madrasa attached to it, and we have a block of WCs, let's say, washrooms which serve to the mosque, but also to the public. The next period is the Ilkhanid period. This one goes in line with the Mongol conquest in the Islamic world in 1221 by establishing the rule over much of Western Asia, including Iraq, Iran, Khorasan, Caucasus, and part of Asia Minor, was given the title of Ilkhan, let's say, right? Khan's subordinate. This one is a branch of Mongol dynasty. Although the Mongols' conquest initially brought destruction, as we all know, but after their conversion to Islam of Ilkhan Mahmud Ghazan in 1295, Islamic art flourished once again. After converting to Islam, the Ilkhanids built numerous Sufi mosques, mostly, and shrines through Iran, Arbabil, Isfahan, Natanz, Tabriz, etc. Going on to the next period of Timurid period. Actually, if you see here, the styles are a little bit tally with each other, right? They go along because the region where these styles were developed was almost the same. But the reason why I put it as a different style is just to show the evolution of empires that have ruled in those areas. The Timurid period, where the Timurids were the last great dynasty to emerge from Central Asia. In 1370, the founder Timur, who belonged to a Turco-Mongolian tribe, established Samarkand as his capital, we can say. So in terms of architectural language, is a continuation of what we saw from the Seljuk Empire, from the Ilkhanid period. So we have a massive scale buildings and objects with large entrance portals and thick minarets covered with tile decoration. Here, the tile, this turquoise color, was very, very striking and was very populated in its usage. The most famous of the Timurid moments are the Temple of Mahatia Savi in Turkestan, or also Bibi Khayyam. Okay, this one is an illustration, very nice illustration from a French architect, Pascal Coste, who visited Persia in the 19th century. Yeah, but another one, actually another temple, very famous, we can say, is a Bibi Khayyam mosque in Samarkand. Yeah, this one that we are showing in the first slide, sorry. Okay, moving on to, let's say, the last style. When we are talking about classical or traditional Islamic architecture, let's say, which is Ottoman period. As we know, Ottoman period was founded in 1299. Okay, I did a mistake there. It should be 1299 to 1370 by Osman Gazi. The first capital was Bursa, then Edirne, and then finally was Istanbul, which started with the classical period. Ottoman rule extended for a period about 700, and in its peak, the Ottoman Empire covered a vast territory, which included Balkans, Greece, Anatolia, Syria, Iraq, Egypt, holy cities of Arabia, Algeria, and Tunisia. This empire lasted until 1924. Since it is a very long period, it's like 700, also the architecture and the style underwent into changes during this period. So the first one, it started in Iznik, right? We said it started in Iznik, continuing in Bursa, and then going to Edirne. So if we want to divide the architectural development during Ottoman period, we can divide it into three periods. The first one is the early period, is the formative phase, let's say, from 1299 to 1453. One very prominent example during this period is the Ulu Jami Bursa, the Grand Mosque in Bursa. As we can see here, the mosque doesn't have a central dome. It has multiple domes, small domes, lowered in scale. Again, still have minaret, which is taking some influences from Mamluk, from Seljuks, what we saw before, but it was not yet developed into the pencil form minaret as we are used. It has a covered and internal central courtyard, as you can see here, the fountain. Other examples of the early period are the Iznik Green Mosque. It took this name due to the tiles, turquoise tiles in the minarets. You see here in this Iznik Green Mosque in Bursa, we have some influence from Persian art, right? It reminds us those domes covered with tiles. And then another famous mosque during this early period is Edirne Sharefeli Mosque. Before this, we can say that Ottoman architecture demonstrated the previous traditions, including those of Seljuk and Byzant. After this, we start with the classical period because the conquest of Constantinople in 1453 marked the beginning of classical architecture. Somehow it exposed the Ottoman architects to a whole new range of buildings. The most important one is Hagia Sophia, for example, which was a church and then it was turned into a mosque. The architect who left traces in this period is the famous architect Sinani. But later, this architecture, with the territories that it took, somehow start to expand. So the rise and the growth of Ottoman Empire was not only in the political field, but was also in the field of art. So in the classical period, we have the increasement dramatically in size of the dome, of half domes, and the small domes around the central one. The number of mosques with, I mean, the domes don't have anymore only one dome or many, but they have different types of domes in one building. Here we have also the religious complexes, let's say, right? If you see in this photo, we have the Suleymaniye. The Suleymaniye complex, it comprises of different buildings within the complex. This one is done during the Sultan Suleiman the Great. So here we have the central mosque, we have gardens, we have tombs, for example, tombs of sultans, of Hürrem Sultan. We have quarters of warden of the tombs, we have madrasas. You see number 5, 6, 11 and 12, there are 4 madrasas. Madrasa al-awwal, madrasa al-thani, madrasa al-thalith, and madrasa al-rabi. We have Ham to number 13. We have Bath to number 14. We have Darul Hadith as well. Darul Shifa at number 8. So it's a complex where institutional buildings, religious buildings, and healthcare buildings, but not only this, but even commercial buildings like the Han, for example, or like Bimarhane, were incorporated in all this complex. That's an aerial view of this complex, the plan and internal dome of the mosque. This one is a mosque located in Albania, lead mosque actually in Shkodra. I put this just to show that this style, Ottoman style, didn't have impact only within the Turkish border nowadays, but this style was developed in all regions where Ottomans were ruling. For example, here we have a classical architecture, classical mosque, smaller in scale, of course, because it's in Albania, it's not in Istanbul. I mean, it's in a periphery of the empire, is not in the center. But however, we see the influences of the style which goes along in all territories. But during this time, we have also the development of palaces even before actually. But Ottoman palaces are very famous due to their massiveness, due to their activities, due to their political structure they had. So if you see here, it's a huge master plan, right? Having inside the mosque, I mean outside the walls, and then it has the harams, it has the offices, it has the dormitory. It has so many facilities which they have the life within it. Some views from the Topkapı Saray. Here, for example, the main gate, it's like a fortress, right? Even the elements look like that. Then when you go inside, it's more easy, it's more beautiful with this calligraphy, classical calligraphy applied in the walls, floral motif, the materials of stone, of plaster is in there. And we have the late period. The third period is the late one. It starts from 1718 to 1923. And it was developed under the influence of European styles, I should say, and various characteristics. The stages of these periods we can divide into the Tulip period, influence from Europe, Baroque and Turkish Rococo area, the period of Turkish empirical style we can see, because we see there some effects of the imperial style that appears in France, eclectic period from 1860 to 1900, and later the national architecture movement. So some examples of these buildings during this period can be this Dolmabahce, Saray Mosque, but also Istanbul Nur Osmaniye Jami. Let's say here in photo, I put also the Muhammad Ali Pasha Mosque in Cairo to show that these styles were also developed in other countries, like Egypt in this case. We have the Yildiz Hamidiye Mosque, which was during the time of eclectic period. We can see even from the style is different from what we have seen so far in Ottoman architecture. Also here we have the development of palaces. So the palaces also in terms of style and architectural language is following the overall language which was happening during that time. So here we see the Baroque a little bit, the Rococo in the facade, the internal, too much of Baroque inside with the gold color, the lavishly treatment. And then going a little bit, just a little bit to Mughal architecture and Southeastern architecture. We can say that this architecture were strongly influenced by early Hindu styles, but also from China's influences. That's why we see these temples or this mosque, better to say this mosque, is very different from what we have seen in the classical architecture. The reason why is because they are following the vernacular architecture. And this is very interesting in Islamic civilization in terms of art and architecture. We embrace whatever we find, right? But we put the value of the religion. And that's why a lot of scholars will say that what you see in Islamic architecture is a unity in diversity. What does this mean? It means that you have so many different styles, but again, you understand that is Islamic architecture. And then going on to the style of end of 20th century, here we see a more contemporary approach, let's say, right? We witness an urgence of historical movement in Islamic architecture because it was influenced by contemporary thoughts in the West, as well as the influence of the culture of the state. For example, the mosque in Malaysia is very different from the mosque in Ankara, even though they are happening at the same time, like 20th century. The approach is towards rational, abstract, and kind of minimalist projects. Some of the mosques that we can mention and that I put here as an example is the National Mosque in Kuala Lumpur, the mosque in Jeddah, or the mosque of Hassan II Casablanca in Morocco, the Great Mosque of Nyono in Mali, National Mosque in Ankara, etc., etc. So basically, this was mainly the style that have evolved from Prophet time, alayhi salam, till nowadays, or better say early of 20th, because nowadays we have a contemporary architecture quite different going on. And then in terms of art and decoration, it's a very wide topic, honestly, but just shortly, maybe I can say that the philosophical concept that has shaped the geometry or the decoration, the ornamentation are divided into four. The first one is unity. The second one is eternity. Third one is abstraction, and also the fourth one is rhythm and symmetry. So in all these kind of traditional elements that we have seen in architecture, somehow they have this principle which is guiding those. Maybe we should mention that in Islamic architecture, the expression of human figures was not allowed. Therefore, this gave the freedom to the artist to develop more into abstract treatment. Like if you go to the churches, you'll see the faces of saints, right, of Jesus, and all these good people, but we couldn't do this. Therefore, they have to think of something different to apply into the internal part, into the external part of the building, such as geometry, for example. Geometry is under the science of sacred geometry, we can say, somehow reflects the divine concept of harmony of humanity. It is one of the most used decoration in all type of buildings. It's a combination of different shapes. Everything actually starts from a circle, and after that they develop it into numerous shapes, combination with each other, creating an infinity of a pattern. Second one is the calligraphy, one of the most important elements of Islamic art, because calligraphy not only is a medium or a tool to beautify the building, but also is giving messages, is giving a message. So in all this Islamic art, what the artists are trying to do is to make people think about the creator, to make them more closer to their belief. And type of calligraphy was different actually, from Kufi, from Thuluth, from classical style, etc. And it was applied in internal decoration, it was applied in external, into the domes, as you see here. It was applied even into the minaret, for example, the minaret Qutb I put here as an example. It was applied also in the palaces, for example, to the Asaka in Morocco. So you see the calligraphy is incorporated within the arabesque decoration. Muqarnas is another very, very important decoration element, but besides decoration is also structural element. Muqarnas is totally Islamic. It's an invention, I should say. It's a three-dimensional decoration. The dome at Muqarnas is a completely Islamic creation. We didn't see this in other civilizations. It was used in domes, in niches, in arches. Somehow this Muqarnas was a module. This module was attached, like they were attaching to each other, forming this 3D pattern. And somehow they made the high ceiling look more human in scale, right? They give a liveness, they give this lively look to the ceiling. Some examples where Muqarnas are used, for example, St. Petersburg Mosque in Russia, in Bazaar of Kashan in Isfahan. And these Muqarnas will come in different shapes, in different colors, very detailed orientation. So nice. Arabesque are well known, decorative. Usually it is used in walls, windows of the mosque or other buildings. Is a fine application of repetitive geometric shapes, but also inside there is a inclusion of floral motifs as well. The light is another decorative element, we should say. It's a functional element, but also is a decorative element. For the light, we can say that the influence was straight from the religion, because we have so many verses where God talks about Nur, right? About the light, and also symbolically, the light, it's like an expression of the philosophy where people walk and they stay in the right path. Whenever they find the God, somehow they have found the truth. This is the reason why in the mosque we have so many light into it. It's like a symbolical path of traveling for a person, traveling from a darkness into the light, into the truth. Another one is water. Water is a state somehow that all living things are made of water. It emphasizes the importance of this element in the Islamic life. It's an integral role in architecture from Middle East and beyond. It is symbolically because it represents purity and life, but also it's practical. It is used to clean the body. So they took this element, which is a very essential to the life, and they brought it into this aesthetical treatment. Let's say they incorporated the water into the courtyards, into the fountains, into pools, etc. And the last one included for this presentation is the painting. The painting, we should say that Muslims, they were very sensitive to the human and animal figures or sculptures. So we don't have so many, including, I mean, to the paintings. Even though we have some scenes, mostly these scenes are representing some historical development. Sometimes we have the presence of animals like the bird or the elephant most of the time. For example, here we see at the Lahore Fort in Pakistan. Basically, this is all about Islamic architecture evolution and decoration. Of course, it's a very wide topic. It is a style developed from four sides of the world, in all continents. It is still going on. All these traditional decorative elements are developed and they are brought now in a contemporary approach, let's say. I hope you all have enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.